What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamoda and Danny Abdeljabbar. What's up, my friend?
Chilling, man, as per usual. How about yourself?
I'm good. Am I positioned well in the camera?
Uh, Not particularly, but I could probably fix it. It's fine.
Okay.
I
I'm
can
just
zoom in on.
comfortable, so I don't feel like moving.
Just stay right there. I can fix it. I'll zoom in on you. It's fine.
I got like a weird setup because I have tendonitis in my elbow, so I have to have a pillow on my lap at all times because it gets quite painful when my elbows don't have any support.
Is that like the tennis elbow or whatever?
Yeah.
I get that shit too. It sucks.
But it sucks. It goes like all the way up to your hand sometimes.
Mhm.
It fucking is terrible.
Yeah.
I've had it for years. I've had it probably since I was like 19.
Somebody told me it was like I'm benching wrong or something like that.
I got it when I started like seriously lifting weights.
Yeah.
And
same.
I started seriously lifting weights when I was in college. And it's just like the stress of like having a big load on your triceps and you know, when you're benching like real heavy weight, like, you know, around 300, then it's just like a lot of stress on you.
I've never reached that much in my life. That's impressive.
I mean, I never really benched much higher than 300 pounds, but that was like,
I think I've done like 230 tops. Like that was like my absolute max. I could do like one.
I never hit 3 plates.
No, me neither. Never. Not even close. Not even close.
The most was 315. I failed every single time I ever tried to do a 3-plate bench. But
yeah,
I'm tall and lanky. That's my problem. You know, my arms are just the range of motion, and I have bad shoulders, and so I have to have a super close grip. So it's just like all triceps. That's probably why my elbow's fucked up.
Yep.
But I don't want to talk about that. Well, speaking of bench press, this is actually a pretty good segue because
how?
I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about Zohran Mamdani.
How do you relate that to bench pressing?
Well, so there's this video of Zohran, and he's bench pressing at like a street park.
I gotta pull that up.
And he's benching like 135, and he wasn't able to get a rep up. And it's whatever. Who cares about how much somebody can lift?
Right.
And when it comes to being an elected official. But the funny thing is that so Andrew Cuomo commented, he's like, I can't even bench his own body weight. How is he going to hold up New York?
What? Oh, man.
And it's funny coming from the Cuomos because the Cuomos are just like the most stereotypical Guido.
Yeah, they really are.
Guinea wops, you know, like
they really are.
His brothers,
I wonder how much
Cuomo,
how much can Curtis Sliwa bench? You know, like he doesn't look very fit. God forbid.
I mean, I'm sure he's somewhat strong. I don't know. Who knows? He seems like he's probably stronger than Sammy, but I'm more so making fun of the Cuomos for being meatheads.
Yeah.
Because Chris Cuomo, if you look at him, man, he's actually he's in amazing shape. His brother.
Yeah.
I've seen like his videos lifting, and he's a strong guy, like legitimately. Where
I mean,
people
huge,
are like, "Oh, that must be fake. Those must be fake weights." And I'm like, no, he's just in real good shape. Like you see him with his shirt off, he looks amazing, and he's in his 50s.
Right.
He's probably on
HGH or some shit like that.
He's probably on some sort of drug or enhancement. But I mean, when you're in your 50s, I'm 100% going to be taking testosterone.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, me too.
without a doubt. As soon as I get the opportunity to take test, I'm absolutely taking it. Like,
why not?
unless like some side effects come out and tells you that, and consensus is that it's going to kill you or shorten your life. Why not want this like increased amount of energy?
Yeah.
Like, why not have the energy levels and the testosterone levels as of a 28-year-old when you're in your 50s?
Right.
But to me, it's a no-brainer. So, I mean, I don't blame him, but he's probably on some sort of drug, which is fine. But yeah, it was just funny that Andrew Cuomo was the one making fun of him, this meathead who's like, oh, look at this weakling. You can't even bench. That was the insult.
Actually, I have the video if you want me to pull it up real fast.
Yeah, show the video.
There he is.
By lifting 135 pounds, but ended up humiliating himself instead when he couldn't even do one rep.
Whatever.
You move up in the ring.
I mean, look at him. He looks small, you know, like we're going to look up his height and weight in a minute, but that's okay.
I mean, you know, he might have shoulder issues.
Well, I mean, look at his frame. Look at his physique. He's a skinny dude, right? Look, he doesn't look like he does very much more than like maybe run or like maybe a couple of push-ups at home. Like it doesn't look like it. Let's find out what his height and weight is. Zohran Mamdani.
Zohran Mamdani. He looks like he's maybe 140.
Yeah. Okay.
And what, 5'5"?
I'm not really seeing any.
He's a tiny person.
Google is not telling me immediately what his height and weight is, so I think it's probably just not publicly known. But he doesn't look very.
All right.
He doesn't look very big.
Let's just say 5'5", 130, 140.
Yeah,
I think that's a reasonable height and weight on him.
So he can't bench his own body weight, but you know what? You could put that test to like, you know, any New Yorker, and I feel like probably 8 out of 10 New Yorkers can't bench press their own body weight. You know,
most adults can bench their own body weight. Most
we're
adult
talking
men
about
can bench
talking
their own
about
body weight.
New Yorkers.
I would say most New Yorkers could.
I don't know.
Maybe not. I mean, it depends on how some super heavy person may not be able to do it, but
yeah,
I think anyone less than 200 pounds will be able to do it. Once you get a certain age, like you should just be able to throw this kind of weight around. Like once you hit, maybe when you're a teenager, it's a little bit harder because you haven't really finished puberty. But once you are over 18 or so, because I remember when I was younger, my big weakness in football was my upper body strength. I had a real hard time benching, and then like as soon as I turned 18, like weight that seemed so heavy to me was just extremely light because it just took me a while to like develop.
It wasn't until I was like maybe mid-20s that I was actually getting strong. I think I hit my second puberty a little late.
Whatever. Who cares about this? It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. I just think it's funny.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about Mamdani because I wanted to get your opinion on him because you're more on the left and you have worked in Democrat politics or DNC politics. So there's a couple of interesting things about him. And the most interesting is the kind of betrayal of him is that he's this kind of radical communist who's in the most extreme version of this narrative is that he's a radical communist who's also going to implement Sharia law,
which I mean, you know, is bullshit, but that's the going logic.
He's a radical communist who's like really progressive on the social issues, and he's also going to be implementing Sharia law after that. So it's going to be like, I don't know what do you even call this ideology. Is it called like progressive Islamist or Marxist Islamism? And I think it's funny. He doesn't really bleed too much with social issues from what I've seen. You know, he speaks more like a real democratic socialist or primarily sticks to those issues. Of course, he's going to pander to progressive communities because you're kind of forced to when you're a Democrat. But what I hear from him is mostly about freezing rent and you know, increasing social welfare and affordability. That's the main thing that he's running on. But I think he's interesting because of how he's being attacked. Obviously, the campaign is it kind of echoes the AOC campaign where she was a big underdog.
Yeah.
So there's some things that are very interesting. There's some things that kind of status quo, in my opinion. You know, I feel like most big cities have a very progressive social Democrat type mayor. So in some regards, I'm like, is it that big of a thing? But you know, it's New York City. It's the biggest city it's the most important city in the world. So I guess it is different. And then of course there's his stance on foreign policy, which really shouldn't matter too much given that he's a mayor. But I guess there is, I mean, there is an importance to it when it comes to New York City because New York City itself does have a relationship with Israel. There's all types of like economic alliances between Israel and New York City. Like the NYPD is trained by the IDF. New York City owns like a lot of Israeli bonds. So there's a lot of connection there. But I mean, other than that, like there really shouldn't be, foreign policy shouldn't be a prime subject in a municipal election. So
yeah, probably not. And I think
enough.
the way that Mamdani kind of rides those questions, especially when it comes from people on the right or, you know, even some of his opponents in, you know, the Democratic Party, it kind of like lays bare the kind of ridiculousness of the line of questioning. There's that very famous like clip, and I don't have it in front of me, so I'll try and patch it in manually on the edit, but where he's talking about, you know, all of the candidates that were, you know, pre-primary, looking for the Democratic, you know, nomination. And they were asked, you know, if you were elected as, you know, mayor, what's the first, you know, international visit?
The first foreign visit by a mayor of New York is always considered significant. Where would you go first? Left to right, Ms. Adams.
First visit, I would visit the Holy Land.
Mr. Cuomo.
Given the hostility and the anti-Semitism that has been shown in New York, I would go to Israel.
Mr. Tilson, where would you go?
Yeah, I'd make my 4th trip to Israel, followed by my 5th trip to Ukraine, 2 of our greatest allies fighting on the front lines of the global war on terror.
Mr. Mamdani.
I would stay in New York City. My plans are to address New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and focus on that.
Mr. Mamdani, can I just jump in? Would you visit Israel as mayor?
I will be doing, as the mayor, I'll be standing up for Jewish New Yorkers, and I'll be meeting them wherever they are across the 5 boroughs, whether that's in their synagogues and temples or at their homes or at the subway platform, because ultimately we need to focus on delivering on their concerns.
And just yes or no, do you believe in a Jewish state of Israel?
I believe Israel has the right to exist.
As a Jewish state?
As a state with equal rights.
He won't
Not as a
say it
Jewish
has a
state.
right to exist as a Jewish state. Be very
And
clear
his
on
answer was no, he won't visit Israel.
I said that.
That's what he was trying to say.
No. Unlike
No,
you, I
you
answer.
never-
Unlike
you
you, I
never
answer
said
questions
no.
very
Okay.
directly.
All right.
My goal would be to take my first trip to Israel. My wife's life work in this area means a lot to our family, and it could coincide with my young son Miles' bar mitzvah. If you'd like to have,
I mean,
Okay,
when you step back and think about it, for real, like challenging the status quo on this line of questioning, I think is absolutely what New York needs, because New York's got its own set of fucking challenges. You know, you still live in New York. I've lived in New York for a really long time. You know that there are problems in New York. And I think there's like something about, you know, this idea that, you know, it's not very America first, or it's not very New York first to, you know, to even be entertaining this line of questioning. Like the fact that this even comes up is really funny. And I think he does a really good job at pointing out how absurd that line of questioning is.
Yeah, well, to correct the record, I don't live in New York City anymore. I live in Long Island, so I haven't lived in New York City for 2 years. So I don't really have it. I don't really have a dog in the fight, per se, because I'm not there. So a lot of the policies won't really impact me that much. Of course, I'm in the city a lot. However,
Sure,
I don't live there.
Yeah.
But yeah, with the, you know, it is what it is. Like the New York City mayor, it's a very important city for Israel. There's obviously a very large Jewish population in New York, the largest outside of Israel. And you're going to have to, if you're going to have a good relationship with one country, it's going to be Israel, especially how many, you know, huge Zionist owners there are. So for him to question that, obviously it took some balls, but it was also common sense. Like it resonated.
Right.
Like anyone who hears that can't be like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, why was that even a question in the first place? It's just like bizarre.
Right.
But he has, and I've heard him talk about it, and he's like a well-read guy. You can tell that he reads books, and he's able to quote historians, and he knows about the issue. But I think in general, he's an educated guy. So when he talks about things, you can, you know, to some degree, he knows political philosophy. I'm sure he's read, you know, Marx and though he's not a Marxist by any means.
Yeah.
You can tell that he's read a lot, on a lot of subject matters. Now, my question for you is that, so you're not in New York anymore, so you don't have a dog in the fight either. But
That's right.
like, what is your general take on him? Like, do Do you like him? Do you think he's too extreme? I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I like him. I think no, I don't think he's very extreme at all. I think, if you are to take the people, on Fox News or, on the right-wing media, for what they're, for on their word, he's a crazy communist, whatever. And he's just not, like he's not very left-wing. A lot of the policies that can be misconstrued as communist or socialist, have a very reasonable framework, and also come with a pretty straightforward plan on how to pay for it. This is less of a pie in the sky, like we're going to redistribute wealth and not really tell you how we're going to do it, and more of like, here are a few really important things for New Yorkers, like the cost of rent. We can do a rent freeze. This is something that New York City mayors do all the time. Eric Adams just did it not too long ago, or whether it be the cost of like food. He's like, hey, let's try this thing where we do like, at cost grocery stores to make groceries cheaper for people. How we're going to pay for it? We're going to tax the millionaires. Now, you could disagree with taxing millionaires more. That's 100% on the table. And I'm happy and open to have that debate. But there's no thought in my mind of like, this guy's full of shit and just saying the things that New Yorkers want to hear without an actual concrete plan on how to do them. Whether or not they work, that remains to be seen. But even he's, got a pretty positive attitude on that. Like on the New York City, grocery stores idea, he even says like, I'd like to pilot it. And if it works, fantastic. And if it doesn't, we move on to something else. I like that attitude. We should. And,
why don't we pull up his website? Because I want to just pull sources directly from his campaign.
Sure.
And we can talk about it. And you could tell me how you think it's a good idea.
All right.
I can say how it may not be a good idea. But honestly, I'm not really too interested in like offering some type of critique of his policies. I'm more interested in understanding like the phenomenon, because it is a big deal. Because he's somebody who rose up out of like the Queen's political machine. He's not a well-known person. So it's interesting. He has so much traction. Okay, this picture is hilarious. Like, talk about presenting yourself as foreign.
I mean, it's a traditional shirt. This isn't, and it's also, it looks nice on him. I think this is.
It looks nice. I'm not saying it doesn't look nice. I'm just saying that I can understand kind of the knee-jerk reaction of somebody being like, "Holy, like what's going on here? Is this?"
I mean, if you put a turban on him or whatever, it'll only make it worse. I get it. I understand where you're coming from. But like also that this is a critique on like the way that we prejudge people. This is straight up like an exercise in taunting prejudice. Yes, he's foreign. He was born in Uganda. He's a Muslim, right? But at the same time, like if you're gonna judge him based on like the shirt that he decides to wear from his culture, and not spend any time thinking through some of the things that he's proposing for New York City, then you're kind of already losing that argument, in my opinion.
Listen, I get you. I understand. I'm just saying, I would understand a conservative's first reason when they're opening up this website.
We're still talking about New York City.
Zohran Mamdani.
We're still
Zohran. Very little.
Running for president. There's not a whole lot of conservatives in New York to protest. For where it would any kind of pushback on this would make any sense.
Well, I can see. So I know the thought process, and I could see I could put myself in the perspective of a conservative, and they look at this website and they're like, "Oh dear, look at that foreign guy who's going to be mayor of New York.
Right.
He's really, really left wing. He wants to do all sorts of crazy things, and he's also Muslim, and just being shocked. Yeah, of course, there's prejudice involved in that, but I can kind of understand where it is blatantly a very foreign looking attire.
Yeah, I mean, he could
criticizing him.
Yeah,
not
he could have chosen.
It is what it is. He looks foreign.
It's 100% a choice, right? He could have chosen to wear like a suit, and when he goes like on the on Fox News or whatever, when he's doing his interviews, when he's doing his debates, he's usually wearing like like a just traditional regular suit. He could have just had that, but they chose to promote this, and I think it's badass. I think it's badass to show like I'm not your run of the mill candidate. I think it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, he's running for mayor in New York, and I don't know what the percentage of people who are who live in New York who are foreign born or have some sort of non-white background. So, I don't know, does this appeal to Spanish people? Does this appeal to Hispanics? Does this appeal to, like, who does this appeal to? It definitely appeals to like white liberals from Brooklyn. But
I don't necessarily know if it's an appeals kind of thing. I think this is where, and we're talking about just like, you asked me for my liberal thought perspective, right? So in my liberal perspective, this has less to do with whether or not I identify with Zohran as a brown foreign Muslim guy, and more of
that's what I'm getting at.
And more of, do I identify with his individuality? Like, I am very attracted to Zohran's like ownership of who he is and not being afraid of showing off, like the fact, like, yeah, I'm Muslim, I'm brown, I was born in Uganda, right? I think that's cool. I hate when people like try to whitewash themselves. And I mean, I don't mean that like literally and like make themselves white. I mean like make themselves bland to fit in, you know? I like that he's being different. I think it's cool.
Well, to his credit, he's not that much of a racial panderer. You know, there's some progressive politicians, like their whole thing is being a race peddler. Right. He's not really a race peddler at all.
He isn't.
But
he's not afraid to wear this shirt on the front page of his website.
Yeah, I just think it's funny. Mm-hmm. I just think the reactions are funny. He's kind of living up to the stigma that the conservative, like the Fox News audience.
It's kind of it's rage baity. It's a little rage baity.
Yeah, it is a little rage bait. Let's scroll down. So
I think we want to go right for the platform section of his website.
Yeah, let's go to the platform. So this is what he's running on, basically, housing. Yeah. That's like the number one thing that's his big issue.
Yeah, affordability, I think, generally speaking. But yes, this is the first thing on his thing. So let's read this one. Freeze the rent. Okay, wow, he has little videos from. Is this a long video? Okay, it's a TikTok. It can't be that long. Let's listen to him.
We can't hear it.
That's corny.
You hear something? I don't hear anything.
Okay. I know you couldn't hear it, but were you able to read it?
Yeah.
What do you think?
So freezing the rent. So a majority of New Yorkers are tenants, and more than 2 million of them live in rent-stabilized apartments. These homes should be the bedrock of economic security for the city's working class. Instead, Eric Adams has taken every opportunity to squeeze tenants with his hand-picked appointees to rent guidelines, board jacking up rents on stabilized apartments by 12.6% and counting, the most since Republican ran the city hall. As mayor, Zohran will immediately freeze the rent for all stabilized tenants and use every available resource to build the housing New Yorkers need and bring down the rent. The number one reason working families are leaving our city is the housing crisis. The mayor has the power to change that. Okay, so freezing the rent. So freezing the rent. So just freezing rent payments in total?
No. What freezing the rent means is it's very
freezing the rate. The rate.
This only applies to rent stabilized apartment buildings, right? So if you Henry are the owner of a rent stabilized building, that means that you have to abide by certain laws as is dictated by the city of New York on how you can either raise or set your rates for rent. So for example, you can't have rent this year for $1,000 and next year when they go to renew, make it $2,000. That would constitute a 100% increase in rent. That would go against the rent stabilization guidelines as set out by City Hall in New York City, right? They will say, oh, you can raise it, but you can only raise it by 5% or 10% or whatever the number is, right? And this is, again, I want to make this very clear. This is only for rent stabilized units, the ones that fall under the umbrella of rent stabilization. I don't know what the proportion in New York City is of rent stabilized versus not rent stabilized, but I can tell you of all of the places that I've ever lived in New York City, they've never been rent stabilized. So of course that's a very small selection of buildings for me, but we're talking about a specific subset, but a very important subset, because the people who live in rent stabilized buildings are the people who need cheap rent. Like, they don't make a lot of money. And so what Zohran is asserting is that people like Eric Adams raise the rent every single year because he has, he's in the pocket of the real estate interests in New York City, and he's a part of the real estate industry in New York City. So it behooves him to make more money that way by increasing the rents, where he's proposing freezing the rent, which has been done before. He mentioned Bill de Blasio had done it. I think I misspoke earlier in the episode saying that Eric Adams had done it, but it's well within the mayor's authority to freeze rents, and that just means that you can't increase the rent. That's it.
So there are about 960,000 rent stabilized apartments in New York as of 2023. I imagine that number is not very different.
Right.
So roughly around 1 million.
Mm-hmm. Out of how many?
I mean,
out of how many total units, right? Like, what percentage of New York is that? There's definitely more than 1 million apartments in New York City.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the percent. If I was to make a wild guess, I would say somewhere like between 8%. Let's see. So actually, no, I'm way off. So there's 2.2 million rental units in New York.
So a little under half.
44% of rental apartments in New York City are rent stabilized.
Okay. So we're talking about that 44% of New York City apartments that fall within the rent stabilization, right? And the prior board, as was under Eric Adams, according to Zohran Mamdani, has been increasing stabilized rent on stabilized apartments by 12.6%. And so what he's proposing is just don't do that anymore.
Don't continue the raise to rent.
Correct. He's not saying pause payments to the landlords of your rent. That's not what rent freeze means. It just means don't raise the rent anymore.
I mean, I understand how some people get completely just essentially kicked out of their apartments because the rent hike is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with I didn't live in a stabilized apartment, but when I was living in Brooklyn, they raised my rent from it was something crazy, like $2,800 to $4,000.
Yeah.
And when my lease was done,
mm-hmm.
which is a crazy jump.
Right.
So I understand that if this happens to somebody who's lower income, that it could totally just debilitate their life. But just to kind of bring up the negative consequences of doing this is that there's a lot of negatives here. You can reduce the amount of units. It causes miscalculations in pricing. It shrinks the supply of housing units. So there's a consequence, and also given just how many stabilized units there are in New York, it's a pretty radical. In this case, this does seem like a pretty radical initiative policy.
I disagree. It doesn't sound that radical to me because it's been done before. So it's not novel in that respect. It's not like he's the only person to ever suggest this or to do this. That's the first point. And the second point is you touch on a more important part, which he also addresses in that video, which is the supply is low, right? Freezing the rent doesn't arbitrarily, it doesn't create less apartments. It doesn't subtract apartments from the mix. Those apartments still exist and they will still be for rent. And, the people who live there won't get displaced because the rent has gone up an inordinate amount, for them where they can't afford to live there anymore. Right. So
this actually leads to the next platform. So why don't we bring that up?
Okay. Which is building
affordable housing.
I'm not going to play that video. We could just read through this. So it's saying we need a lot more affordable housing, but for decades, New York City has relied almost entirely on changing the zoning code to entice private development with results that can fall short of big promises. And the housing that does get built is often out of reach for the working class who need it most. Mayor Zohran will put our public dollars to work and triple the city's production of permanently affordable, union-built, rent-stabilized homes, constructing 200,000 new units over the next 10 years. Any 100% affordable development gets fast-tracked, no more pointless delays. and Zohran will fully staff our city's housing agencies so we can actually get the work done. For the additional housing we need, Zohran will initiate a comprehensive plan for New York City to create a holistic vision for affordability, equity, and growth. This plan will allow NYC to address the legacy of racially discriminatory zoning, increase density near transit hubs, and the requirement to build parking lots and proactively chart our future. There's not a lot of specifics in how he would get this done. So my initial reaction to this is it sounds good on the face of it, but I don't know how. I'm just not like qualified to speak on this, right? I don't know how it is that a mayor, what impact the mayor has to increase the construction specifically by 200,000 new affordable union-built rent-stabilized homes. I don't actually know how the mayor does that. So that is a deficiency of mine that I'm curious about. But on the face of it, it sounds fine. Like, I see nothing wrong with this. I think everyone would agree that there's probably not enough affordable housing. And, you know, at least in the development in the areas of Brooklyn that I was living in, a lot of the buildings that they were putting up were these like luxury, you know, high-rise places that were pretty unaffordable for regular New Yorkers, you know. I think it makes sense to build housing that people can actually afford to live in, you know?
Oh, I'm looking at, I just did a ChatGPT search, so I don't know how correct this is, but it says that urban planners estimate that city-owned land could support 60,000 to 80,000 units if built out strategically. And they would be using parking lots, old maids yard. I mean, there's a shitload of parking lots in New York City. There's a lot of like old ass shit that like
nobody's doing anything with,
knocked down, and no one's doing anything with it. I don't know the reasons why, but I'm sure there's a lot of
bureaucratic red tape bullshit.
Yeah. But I mean, if you just go to Brooklyn, there's so many like old ass factories and that haven't been used in a long time. But there's I mean, they're building a lot in Brooklyn.
Sure, but
especially in like downtown Brooklyn. But no, to your point, they're building like luxury, or apartments that cost like $4,000 a month.
Do you remember the last apartment that I lived in New York? You've been there for like a Halloween party once. You remember that? That place was fucking sick. This was the bougiest place that I've ever lived in, and I'm not gonna say where, because I'm almost embarrassed to say that I lived there because it is so fucking bougie. But it was mostly empty, and that place had been around for like 2 or 3 years, and like most of the units hadn't sold because they're way too expensive. I was personally fortunate enough to like be able to afford to live there, and also I took advantage of like a COVID discount that they offered. But you know, they build a lot of that. That is what they build. That's what developers are building, because you know, higher up market, you know, they believe like if you build it, they will come, right? Like suddenly, if we build a bunch of nice luxury places, all the rich people are just going to move there, which may or may not be true. But at least in my experience from that one building, it was mostly empty 3 years later.
Yeah, I've been there, and it was an insane building, and I don't know if that building brings in a profit or not with their rent increases.
They actually had to go bankrupt. They went bankrupt. The company that owned it.
That's not surprising. I mean, we're talking about, for people listening, this building it was like a resort.
It had a rooftop that looked like the High Line. If you're from New York, you know what that means. It was gorgeous. It had mini golf on the roof. It had a bowling alley. It had a movie theater. It had a gym. And I know you're thinking like, okay, there's gyms in lots of buildings. This gym was so big that it had a rock wall inside of the gym, like a climbing wall. I mean, there were a million other amenities that were associated.
A boxing ring,
a chef's kitchen. This place was the bougiest place I've ever like even set my eyes on. And I mean, this place was clearly not built for, you know, affordability. You know, this is a specific clientele in mind. But the thing was like 2 or 3 city blocks big in the middle of Bushwick. It was interesting. That's what developers have been building lately, you know. And he's saying we should be building affordable shit. I don't know exactly how the mayor would make that a possibility, but I mean, that's the real problem, right?
Well, I wonder if, so, you know, they would end the parking lot requirement. So there's mandatory minimum parking. So I guess they'd build there.
Right.
I wonder if this would go, I didn't see anything along these lines, but I wonder if while creating a plan, they would make more housing units in like parts of Queens and Staten Island and like the northern Bronx, which are basically suburbs.
Right.
If they would build stuff there, because that would cause probably those people to move out of New York City. I was at Breezy Point. You ever been to Breezy Point?
Yeah, once or twice.
It's crazy. Like, it is a completely gated city. It's like a city within a city. Just to get into Breezy Point, there's like 2 security points, and I was like kind of shocked that it was so difficult. And also I was shocked that the place it didn't have to build like additional housing in there, because Breezy Point, for people who don't know, it's a beach community in Queens.
It's like right next to Jacob Riis Park, for those that know where that is. I can bring it up.
And the beach at Breezy Point is fucking humongous.
This is where it's at.
I think it might be the biggest beach in New York.
So zooming out, this is Manhattan.
New York State.
This is Manhattan right here. Breezy Point, just south of Brooklyn, on one of this barrier island right here, and it's an interesting community.
All cops. It is almost 100% cops who live there, and I was like wondering, I'm like, they have like, the city hasn't like forced this place to like bring to build like low income housing yet. And I was surprised. So I don't know the specifics of like how that works and how they're able to like maintain their autonomy, but it was interesting. So I wonder if a big plan like that would include building things into these suburbs. But yeah, I think that it would probably, I mean, I moved to Long Island, but I moved to Long Island just because I didn't want to raise a family in Brooklyn.
Right.
So, okay. Let's go down. Cracking down on bad landlords. This is a dog whistle.
1 in 10 renter households reported a lack of adequate heat last winter. 1 in 4 reported mice or rats in their home. 500,000 live in poor quality housing. Every New Yorker deserves a safe and healthy place to call home. That's why Zohran will overhaul the mayor's office to protect tenants and coordinate code enforcement under one roof, making sure agencies work together to hold their owners responsible for the conditions of their buildings. Tenants will be able to schedule and track inspections with a revamped 311. If a landlord refuses to make a repair, the city will do it and then send them the bill. And in the most extreme cases, when an owner demonstrates consistent neglect for their tenants, the city will decisively step in and take control of their properties. Wow. Okay. The worst landlords will be put out of business. Interesting. I could see where people would be specifically mad about this one. But also, it's kind of like a hard argument to have, right? Like, if you are to take what he is saying at face value, he's saying that a good proportion of New York is living in substandard, like, slums in New York. And he's going to hold the owners who are making money off of those units accountable to fix that. And if they don't, then the government's going to fix it. I mean, I'm pretty liberal, and I still think, like, I don't think the government's going to do very much of a good job on that. But I see the argument. I can also see how this could go.
Well, there are some shitty apartments in New York, just infested with rats.
Yeah,
so many problems. I've never lived in a really bad place. Most of them were fine. I don't actually pretty every building I lived in was fine. But I've had friends who've lived in some complete shitholes.
Yeah.
Where, you know, you'd just be greeted by rats when you walked into their lobby.
Right.
You know, there was a story, this happened years ago, but like the landlord like fucked something up with like the gas and exploded the fucking basement and killed some people.
Yeah.
Because he was being cheap. This was like in the East Village. So there are some shitty landlords, but like, I don't know. This seems like it would be. So every deserves health place. That's why. So if a landlord refuses to make a repair, the city will do it and send them the bill. And in the most extreme cases, when an owner demonstrates consistent neglect for their tenants, the city will decisively step in and take control of their property. Oof.
Yeah, that part is the most communist of all of these ideas. If we're going to levy it as, it's not really communist, it's authoritarian, if you will. right? Like that is 100% authoritarian control.
Well, can you picture this Zohran Mamdani, the Muslim,
I'm gonna steal your house,
arresting some Hasidic Jewish person's property.
Are you saying that?
Imagine that on Fox News.
Yeah, I mean that won't play over very well. There are a lot of Hasidic Jewish landlords, specifically in Brooklyn, and they own a lot of real estate and a lot of property. And some of
every landlord I've had has been Hasidic Jewish, and they've all been fine, honestly. Like I never had an issue with them, but except for the rent increase of like 1,000%. But
well, some are maintained better than others. Let's just put it that way. And so, under this law, it could look like the headline will be on Fox News: Muslim, Islamist mayor, steals Jewish landlord's property.
An anti-Semitic targeted confiscation.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I can see that being the headline. But like, then you have to really ask the question though, like, right, like headline aside, did the landlord fuck up so much that they deserve it? Like at what point do we say like enough is enough? Like I personally think that there should be like laws against this. I don't necessarily know that the city should take control of someone's property. I feel like that is unconstitutional. I don't know which amendment that would be under, but I just feel like illegal search and seizure, maybe illegal seizure. They would have to have like a legal precedent to say that we're seizing this.
I mean, obviously a ton of people in New York, a lot of people in New York who like live there and who will be living there for the foreseeable future. And I'm talking about like people who live in like Park Slope, Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
They hate their landlords. Like if you have a conversation with them about like their biggest gripes in life, like the first thing they'll say is like, I hate my landlord so much. He's so irresponsible. He's not available on Saturdays. And they fucking hate their landlord. So this is like an appeal to this progressive yuppie type who lives in Park Slope, who has this like utter contempt for their landlord. Like they feel the landlord is like the person who's putting them down, is their number one enemy in life.
Sure. I actually don't disagree with that. I would expand that and say it's not just the yuppie, folks in Park Slope. Lots of people all over New York hate their landlord.
Yeah, it's all over. I just have a lot of experience with these yuppie types in Park Slope. And
well, lots of people hate their landlord. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think the landlord-tenant, relationship specifically in New York City, but just generally speaking, has always been tenuous, right? So, you want to have somebody to scapegoat, right? He's scapegoating the landlords, and some of them legitimately deserve that scapegoating. Like some of them are fucked up. Like the guy that you had mentioned before, he was being a cheapskate and blew up the whole fucking building. People died, right? Because he was fucking cheap ass, right? So, it's a conversation. I don't know. I'd like to see the specifics on like whether or not it is legal for the city to take over, an owner's property. But it's kind of hard to argue against it. Like, how can you argue in favor of bad landlords?
Well, it's why it's popular. Let's go down to safety. This is one of the more controversial policies that he's proposing.
So the Department of Community Safety. All New Yorkers deserve to be safe, but the Adams administration has failed to deliver the sense of safety and security that everyone should feel walking down our streets, riding our subways, or taking our buses. Zohran will create before it happens by prioritizing solutions which have been consistently shown to improve safety. Police have a critical role to play, but right now we're relying on them to deal with the failures of our social safety net, which prevents them from doing their actual jobs. Through this new city agency of whole of government approach, community safety will be prioritized like never before in NYC. The department will invest in citywide mental health programs, crisis response, including deploying dedicated outreach workers in 100 subway stations, providing medical services in vacant commercial units, and increasing transit ambassadors to assist New Yorkers on their journeys, expand evidence-based gun violence prevention programs, and increase funding to hate violence prevention program. New York Times. And the full proposal there. All right. What do you think? This isn't really saying a whole lot, but
so basically he's saying that they're going to invest in like social workers to help prevent crime before it happens. What's interesting about, at least the homicide rate, I'm sure other statistics have increased, but New York is been on this steady trend downward in terms of homicides, meaning that there's been less homicides year over year. And this trend has been going on since the 1990s. So just to give some context, in 1990, there was like 2,500 homicides in New York City.
In 1990?
In 1990. So in the 80s and 90s, 70s as well, but like the homicide rate really picked up in the 80s. The homicide rate was extreme. Like 2,500 people died of homicides in a
single
American city. That's incredible.
It's basically a 9/11.
In a horrible. Yeah, I mean, it's basically a war zone.
Right.
That's what you would see in like a low-level conflict.
Right.
That would be more deaths than like any year in Iraq.
I mean, that was more deaths than on the first day of October 7th.
Yeah, it's more deaths than a lot of statistics. But so it was at a peak of around 20, almost 2,500 murders. It might be a little bit less. I think it was more like 2,200, but still over 2,000 homicides is a lot. Since the 2010s, the murder rate has been going steadily down. And this year in 2025, New York has had its lowest homicide rate. So it's getting safer in New York, at least in terms of homicides. And New York, when you compare New York to other major cities around America, it's much more safe. It's much more safe than Chicago.
Sure.
At least in like the hoods in Chicago. Chicago is a different animal because Chicago is like way more segregated than New York. So New York, like a lot of neighborhoods are kind of like shuffled together. And Chicago, it's like you have your nice parts and then you have like your bad, rough areas, which are like kind of isolated from the parts that are safe. Other cities are the same way, but like a place like St. Louis or Baltimore or like Camden, New Jersey, their homicide rates are nuts. They're way more dangerous than New York.
Of course.
Because we don't really have the same level of gang violence, but also like the days of like the Bloods and Crips murdering each other, those days are gone.
Yeah. There's like not a whole lot of like unsafe neighborhoods like there used to be in New York City. I'd agree with that.
Well, just in general around the country, like these large like organized criminal enterprises like the Bloods or Crips, or in Chicago like the Black Disciples, and like these real big gangs, they're essentially like their leadership is in jail. They don't really exist anymore. Now it's just like, now these gangs have like 10 people in the gang, and it's just about like controlling a block.
Right.
Rather than some huge territory. It's still violent, but it's not the same as it used to be.
Right.
Where you had like these fucking massive gang wars going on in the cities. So the murder rate has been declining down. I don't know what the Chicago murder rate is right now. I would kind of assume that it's following a similar trajectory from the 80s and 90s when American cities were in complete chaos. But
what are you getting at? So we agree.
So what I'm getting at is that, crime is a big thing that every New York City mayor or every politician is going to need to address. And I think from most people's perspective, when they talk about New York, like when I talk to people who moved from New York, they're like, "Oh, I just had to get out of there. The crime was just so bad. Things were just getting way worse." Well, the statistics that are released by the NYPD, it actually shows
objectively
that the
it's better,
safer. Yeah. Now I go to New York and I'm like, fuck, I can never live here again. And there's still a shit ton of homeless, and there are a lot of predators who walk around in New York. Most of them are mentally ill. But New York has always been that way. Like there's always been insane predators walking around New York City.
So how did those facts and your understanding of that relate to, his idea of creating a Department of Community Safety where, they're allocating some funding to, towards mental health and things like that, social services?
I don't think that, I don't know if that stuff works or not. I mean, I wouldn't really care if they did invest in it, if they tried it out and had some type of case study that it worked. I don't really have a strong opinion on it. But the point I was getting at is that crime has, I think, even if he did become mayor, or he most likely will become mayor,
right?
Given the polling number, he's up like 10 points on Cuomo right now after Adams drops out of the race. I think you're going to see that same trajectory of lower homicides and a safer city continue, because like the safest years were like when Bill de Blasio was mayor, and Bill de Blasio was like a super liberal progressive type.
Sure.
So I don't think that I think just the natural trend, no matter what he does, the murder rates will probably decrease in the city, or at least stay on a similar trajectory of like, less than 300 people homicides.
So then what you're saying here is that like initially when we went on this topic, you're like, hey, this is one of the more like, hot button topics for his platform. But when we review it, like logically, we're like, crime's already going down. Like, and it's probably going to continue to trend in that same direction, barring any crazy changes. And this doesn't appear to be one of them. This doesn't appear to be a crazy change that would somehow induce more crime.
Yeah, I think it would just probably be a neutral type thing. Like, I don't think it would do.
Worst case scenario would be a waste of money.
Good.
Yeah,
that's probably what it would be. It would just be like kind of another bureaucracy where, there's a lot of wasteful spending in the city, and it'd probably be included in that. And who knows? Maybe it does help some people, but I don't see it impacting the city at a big scale. So it's a controversial opinion because crime's always going to be a hot topic, and when progressives get power, the first thing that critics will say is that, oh no, like like even Cuomo and Adams, their main one of their big criticisms of him is that he's going to make the city unsafe because he's going to let criminals walk the streets.
That's a great segue actually. So I actually watched a video. His interview literally today. It came out like 3 hours ago. 3 hours from when we started the pod, maybe 4 or 5 hours at this point. Anyway, he was on Fox News getting interviewed. One of the questions that jumped out at me, I actually took notes on this one. The interviewer cited some polling data showing that 68% of independents in New York City wanted more police on the streets, and noted that Cuomo planned to hire 4,000 to 5,000 additional officers. And then she asks Mamdani directly, she says, will you match that? And will you agree with him on that, on hiring more cops? And at first, like, Mamdani kind of refuses to take the bait, right? Like, he said a joke. He was like, oh, I don't look to Andrew Cuomo for leadership. But then he like clears up that issue. He's like, he wants to keep the number of officers the same and make it easier for those officers to do their jobs, which isn't really answering the question. But in this conversation, what he does, and I think he does an incredibly good job. He's very well spoken, by the way. Like this guy knows his shit. He knows how to speak, and he reframes the issue to kind of point out that, when his campaign started, 200 officers per month were leaving the police force, right? And now it's up to 350. And he makes the argument that the real problem isn't the quantity of police officers that are in New York City, but burnout and misallocation. He's making the claim that the police are being asked to handle shit that they're not qualified or, even care to do. Things like handle, like shooing away homeless people, or like, mental health crises, that come up that they just have to show up for. I mean, personally, I have friends who are cops, and one of them in particular tells me all the time how, he gets called out to do some shit that, like, honestly, he isn't trained for, Now, what Mamdani wants to do is say, hey, I'd like to take some of this funding and then like allocate it to some mental health professionals so that they can go handle those things. This way the actual cops can go out and do cop shit, like stopping homicides or like, arresting thieves or some shit like that. You know what I mean? So it's an interesting way he really hits this head on, I think. And based on what we were talking about before, how the crime rate is going down, you know, people like Cuomo are just kind of like saber rattling a little bit and saying, we're going to hire more cops. It's like, bro, you don't need more cops. It's clearly going down already, you know?
Yeah. At least homicides, I'm not looking at other statistics. Like, you know, homicides don't tell the whole story.
Of course not.
So,
but it's an important statistic.
Like, there's property. It is like the most important,
right?
I think, in my opinion, it's the most important statistic, because chances are, if there's a high homicide rate, there's probably
a high everything else rate. Yeah,
criminal. Yeah, all the other rates are probably going to be high as well. So, yeah, I don't think it's, if he's mayor, we're suddenly the city's gonna burst out into violence because like the criminals aren't being prosecuted and they're roaming the streets. There's other cities that have way more to worry about right now than New York. I will say, one of the things that was my breaking point for New York was just the subway transit, and it wasn't because you were in danger from getting assaulted in a subway, even though I know people who have been. It's just more about the unpleasantness of the entire ride. So chances are, if you go into a New York City subway, there's going to be a lunatic on your train, in your cart.
Yep.
And the lunatic is going to be screaming God knows what. They could be screaming about prophecy. They could be just begging you for money. Almost every subway ride will include a panhandler, where they're like, I just lost my job and I'm trying to provide for my 2-year-old daughter. And it's always a story that, you know, a sad story is like, I just got out of rehab. And it's like every try. Or there's the break dancers, which are the worst offenders.
No, I like that.
I would put those. If he put that in his campaign, or I will throw every break dancer in the train in jail immediately and ship them to a penal colony. I would 100% be all about
vote
that.
For him.
I would vote for him.
No, I like.
But just the unpleasantness of just being in public transportation. Did I ever tell you about the time where I was on a train and this homeless guy is just asking for money, but he's asking for money in a way that I was like, you know what? Sure. Well, he wasn't begging for it. He was just walking up to people. It's like asking for change. So I gave him $1, and he literally sits right in front of me, and he starts he takes out a pipe and he starts smoking crack on the train.
Yeah, I do remember this story.
And I had never smelled crack before or seen crack in my life. And I instantly knew it was crack because it just smelled like bleach and chemicals. Like, oh, this isn't like, he's not smoking weed. He's smoking something that with a shit ton of chemicals in it.
Could have been meth. Could have been meth. Yeah.
I don't know what it was. I'm pretty sure it was crack. If I was going to make an educated guess. They don't really have meth in New York. That's more of a like Southwest thing. So that's just the normal train experience. And it's quite unpleasurable. Let's go down to the next one. Affordability. Yeah, this one is weird. City-owned grocery stores.
All right, let's talk about it.
Food prices are out of control. Nearly 9 in 10 New Yorkers say the cost of groceries is rising faster than their income. Only the very wealthiest aren't feeling squeezed at the register. As Mayor Zohran will create a network of city-owned grocery stores focused on keeping prices low, not making a profit. Without having to pay rent or property taxes, they will reduce overhead and pass on savings to shoppers. They will buy and sell at wholesale prices, centralize warehouse and distribution, and partner with local neighborhoods on products and sourcing, with New York City already spending millions of dollars to subsidize private grocery store operators, which are not even required to take the SNAP WIC. We should redirect public money to real public option. I mean, I think this is so city-ran stores. Does anywhere else have city-ran stores?
I think so. I don't think so.
I'm curious to see if this experiment has ever been tried has this been tried in the U.S.?
I'm also searching the same thing, so we're about to find out. Okay, so apparently there are a few examples, small and mid-sized cities specifically. St. Paul, Kansas has a city bought, the city bought a grocery store when it closed. The city now owns it and operates it as a municipal grocery store. It's a modest success, according to ChatGPT. It has operated for a number of years, and it serves the small town, but the scale is tiny as compared to, New York City. There's another one in Baldwin, Florida. It's a fully municipal grocery. Town owns the building. Employees are municipal payroll. Operates like a normal grocery store. It was made to fill a gap after the private grocers left the area. This one has struggled with finances and competition from nearby chains. It struggles to reach the break-even point. In Chicago, it's proposed or in consideration. I mean, rather than a fully municipal grocery store, the proposal suggests public markets or municipal grocery-like operations, or partnering with nonprofits, things like that. So they haven't done it yet. And then apparently there's some other various rural or small town operations that do town or city owned grocery stores, like in Kansas and the Midwest. So mixed results.
Would these just be like EBT stores? Like they primarily accept food stamps?
No. And I'm not an expert on this, so if I'm completely wrong, that's my bad. But from what I understand, they're just taking the profit out of regular grocery stores, right? So right now, a regular grocery store has to pay rent on the facility that they own. Almost no one in New York City owns the space that they operate out of. So the cost of the building itself and all that is a cost. So if New York, there's a municipal building that they can turn into a grocery store instead, it's not costing the city anything, if it's not in use currently. So there's already an overhead, and that's written on here. There's already an overhead that they'd be saving, right? So that's, cost basis. Same, and on top of that, a private grocery store, or any store really, is looking for a profit, right? So they'll buy some products at wholesale prices and then sell it at retail prices. It's basic economics. So rather than focusing on making a profit, they will focus on trying to sell the goods at or near wholesale prices, right? So if I buy a carrot from the farmer, for 50 cents, and I'm a private grocer, I might turn around and sell that carrot for $1 because I want to make a profit on it, right? Whereas Mamdani's idea is the government owns it, and since they're not paying rent on a building, they don't really need that much profit. So maybe instead of selling it for $1, they sell it for 60 cents, which is just 10 cents more than what the wholesale price would have been. In that case, the consumer here, the New York City residents, would benefit because they get groceries at a much cheaper amount.
Basically, it's like it's like groceries as like a utility.
Kind of.
It's it is what it is. We can go over the arguments of the benefits of having a privately ran market that has incentives, but I don't even really feel like going to that. I think everyone knows the arguments. I don't really care too much what they experiment with this type of stuff. It would be interesting to see the results of the experiment.
Yeah, I think the pushback.
If the city could handle, how many of these stores would they open? Would they primarily be open?
They pilot a few
bad area and poor areas.
I don't know. I don't know the specifics, but I do remember watching a video where he said they would pilot a few. Sub 10 locations, very, very small amount, probably in lower income areas because that's where it's needed most, right? And see what happens. And what's refreshing about how he projects this or how he pitches this is that he even says hey, I think this is a good idea. There's research that we've done to suggest that it's going to work, but if it doesn't work, then we'll move on. And I really like that. And, I think the biggest pushback that most people have on this one is how are you going to pay for this? And I think what's important to note here is that, again, part of the idea of paying for this is a misunderstanding on why it is that he'd be able to pull this off, right? Just by not having to pay for rent is a huge overhead cost that they don't have to apply anymore. And the government doesn't have to make as broad of a profit, right? It's not a private or God forbid, a publicly traded grocery store here, right? They don't have to make a huge profit margin. They can sell as is, as long as it's funded. And the question is, like, how do you pay for all the employees that work there and for the logistics and things like that? That's a good question. That's a fair question to ask. Obviously, he would say that he wants to raise taxes on the millionaires and shit like that, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. But, it's not a terrible idea. And if it doesn't work, he himself is like not trying to stick to an idea that is shitty. At least he's trying something to help people on affordability. He listened to his constituents, New Yorkers. He said groceries are too damn expensive. So here's an idea. Let's try it.
But it's obviously something that they wouldn't be able to do at scale early on.
Also seems like
be a couple of stores throughout the city.
Of course. And it seems like this right here, this part I don't understand fully, but like I'll try to extrapolate to the best of my ability. And it says New York City already spends millions of dollars to subsidize private grocery store operators. So basically they're giving like your bodegas and shit some kind of subsidy from the government, millions of dollars every year. And they're saying that those people that are receiving those government subsidies are not required to take SNAP and WIC. And he doesn't write this specifically here, but I guess the takeaway here is that the government's already spending millions of dollars on these grocery stores, but people still feel like this is way too expensive. So let's instead redirect some of this money that we were giving to these bodegas and shit and try and see if we can do a better job.
Well, we'll see what happens. Let's go to the next one.
You want to do the free buses?
Yeah. So let me see. I'm going to read it from the screen. Public transit should be reliable, safe, and universally accessible, but 1 in 5 New Yorkers struggle to afford. I'm not speaking to the microphone. Struggle to afford. I'm doing a really bad job reading. The ever-rising fare. Sorry, the font is very small. You read it. I'm sorry.
Let's start over. Public transit should be reliable, safe, and universally accessible, but 1 in 5 New Yorkers struggle to afford the ever-rising fare. Adding insult to injury, our city's buses are the slowest in the nation, robbing working people of precious time for family, leisure, and rest. Zohran won New York's first fare-free bus pilot on 5 lines across the city. Interesting. As mayor, he'll permanently eliminate the fare on every city bus and make them faster by rapidly building priority lanes, expanding bus queue jump signals, and dedicated loading zones to keep double parkers out of the way. Fast and free buses will not only make buses reliable and accessible, but will improve safety for riders and operators, creating a world-class service New Yorkers deserve. The buses is nasty. Right. The buses is not clean. You ever seen that meme from forever ago?
I have not. But this is so free buses. I mean, I know what you're going to get in free buses is a lot of homeless degenerates.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about that.
There are going to be a lot of homeless degenerates on free buses.
Okay, so this was actually came up in that interview you did on Fox News today. I also took some notes on there. Let me see if I can pull these up. But that was the talking point. It's like, well, there's just gonna be a bunch of vagrants. The host was reading something from the New York Post, I think it was, and they were saying like making it free will increase the number of homeless people or vagrants that are going to be in there. And actually, what he pointed out, and I can't independently verify this, so take this as it is. But what he pointed out, and what is also written here, is that they got the first fare-free bus pilot on 5 lines across the city. This has been running already, and he pointed out a number of statistics that I didn't write down, and I'll try to find to basically show that there wasn't an increase in. I got it right here. So, for example, during the pilot, assaults on bus operators dropped by 38.9%. Right, so you assume that like there's going to have like vagrants, but that wasn't the case. There wasn't any issue of safety because they were free, and ridership climbed. So more people ended up using the service, which is obvious. It's free, right? So at least from the data that they have already, there hasn't been like more violence that has come about it, and more people are riding it. You would think that the ridership would go down if more vagrants were on them.
So I think, given it's a pilot, so there's a limited amount of buses that.
It's 5 lines. I don't know how many total lines there are in the city, but I mean, 5 lines it's a decent amount.
And given that they're crowded, there's probably not enough room for homeless people to really lounge out and kind of dominate. Because what happens with homeless in the trains, at least, is that they'll get into a cart that's like semi-filled, and then they'll just lay down and just like live there for
set
the
up
day.
camp kind
like
of.
That will be that will be their home, that cart. And during rush hour, they don't really have room, so they can't really get in there. But you really see the problem at like 2 p.m. Or the worst problem is when you're commuting early. So let's say if you're commuting at like 7 in the morning, a lot of these homeless are coming off their benders, and they're just trains are full of them. And that's when you're at the most risk. Well, actually, at that time, a lot of them are so strung out, they can't really move.
Yeah. They're doing the Fenty lean.
At nighttime, you're probably at your most risk in the subway.
Yeah.
At least for violence. But I would imagine that the reason why is because the trains are just so packed. If all the bus fares are free, then, buses that sometimes will not be packed. And you'd have to judge it then. But I mean, another thing is just like where you're going to pay for it. Like, again, with all these things, we can talk. Let's just say if all these social problems social problems aren't created as a consequence,
right?
Still, we're talking about like, how are we going to pay for all this?
Stuff? or we give it credit.
Kind of like,
we give it credit. Maybe we say, okay, yeah, this would be great for New Yorkers, and it won't increase like vagrancy or something like that. But indeed, how do you pay for it, right? And I think that's the crux of the issue. How do you pay for it? And I mean, he doesn't mince ways with this. Like, he is proposing an increase in taxes for the wealthiest in New York City. I think from what I've read and what I've seen him say on the interviews, it's people making over $1 million, they get an extra 2% on their taxes. That's from the city taxes. So, and that would pay for it, according to him. I haven't gone through the numbers on this, but according to him, that's what would happen.
2% flat tax on people with an income of $1 million, right?
It's still gradated tax. So it's for every dollar above $1 million, you get an extra 2% on the taxes that you would have already paid.
That's based on your income, right? So like if you made over $1 million.
Correct.
Not if you have $1 million in assets.
Exactly. So let's say I make $1,001. The first $1 million is whatever the hell the tax bracket is for $1 million, right? And then the million and first dollar gets taxed at the same tax bracket plus 2%.
I gotcha. Okay. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's what, 20K in extra taxes if you're making $1 million
on top of $1 million, right? You're $20 million. Excuse me. If you make $2 million, that's 20K of extra taxes, which is not a small amount of taxes, but it's also kind of a negligible amount for millionaires, for people who are making in that tax bracket.
For someone who's making $1 million salary, then
it's not even $1 million. I want to make that very clear. If you're making exactly $1 million, it doesn't apply to you. It's for every dollar on top of $1 million. You'd have to make a full $2 million, an extra $20,000 in taxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think people who are living in the city, if they're millionaires, they'd probably be willing to pay that. They wouldn't like it. I don't think that wouldn't cause.
I don't think they'd be willing.
That wouldn't cause a flight.
Exactly. 100%.
I don't think that would cause a flight of people because those are big salaries. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it wouldn't really make that big of an impact for them because relatively speaking, that extra 20K, yes, it could go towards some other new investments that can grow. But like, I know people in New York that pay more than that in rent, like every single month. Like for people like that, it wouldn't register for them one way or the other. It's not making or breaking.
Okay. So that 2% flat tax on people with who are making over $1 million. So that is supposed to cover all these social programs, or are there other taxes?
Apparently that's it. According to what he's proposing, that's it. There's apparently enough people who make more than $1 million in New York City, which I believe. I mean, it's fucking one of the richest cities in the world, financial capital of the world for sure. There's a lot of very rich people in New York City.
I would imagine that New York has the most people making over $1 million in the world.
Yeah, I think it's entirely
of any
likely.
city.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a stretch to say that. I would say either that or the only other city I could think of would be Hong Kong, but I doubt that Hong Kong has as many millionaires.
And that extra 2% on top of every dollar made after $1 million for these millionaires isn't going to be like scare them away, and it might piss them off. Yeah, I was talking to my fiance about this. She was like, "If I was a millionaire, I might be a little angry," and she's pretty liberal, But when it comes to money, we don't like people taking our money. So I get it. I understand it. But like most people who live in New York know the deal, Like they understand that there's a cost to live in New York City. And even the richest people, they pay that cost. And they don't care because New York is special in that way. Whether it's because it's New York and it's a prestige thing, whether it's because they have so many investments or, family there, whether it's because, they just are stuck in their ways and they don't want to move, right? Like all of those arguments will outweigh a 2% additional tax, without a doubt.
Yeah, I actually do agree with you. I don't think that would cause a big exodus of millionaires. I would be more interested to see what he does with the corporate tax rate.
Yeah,
but I'm not.
So that one I think is worth a discussion. Here it is. Fight corporate exploitation. I think it is. New York's working class is getting nickel and dimes, making blah, blah, blah. Where's the part? No, that isn't it. This is tax the corporations in the 1%. Here we go. This is the flat 2% tax right now. That's the one that we just took on. It says he wants to match the corporate tax rate to match New Jersey's to 11.5%, which would bring in $5 billion.
What's the corporate tax rate?
I misspoke earlier when I said that was the only thing. Between the 2% tax and the raising the corporate tax to 11.5%, that's how it intends to pay for it. I'm going to find out what's the corporate tax in New York City. It is 7.25%.
Big increase.
It is a noteworthy increase. Excuse me. Wait, I might be wrong. That was just the first thing that popped up, and that was 2021. Let me try and find the most recent one. See, this is why I don't like Google anymore, because like you ask a question and you have to like fucking search through all the things. What's ChatGPT have to say about this? It's the corporate tax rate. Really citing the same thing from 2021. Okay, let's just go with that. In 2021, it was 7.25%. It's probably a little bit more now, but I'm not sure. But let's just go on that. So 7% to 11.5%. Argument he's making here is that New Jersey is just fine. Plenty of businesses set up in New Jersey. In New Jersey, it's 11.5%. In New York, it's 7.25 as of 2021. We're going to raise it to 11.5, and that'll bring in an additional $5 billion.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty dangerous proposition right there.
How do you say? How do you figure?
There are big benefits to having your business located in New York. Like everyone wants a New York office.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could see companies moving their New York offices to other cities, or not even considering New York. Like, there's no way to put it. Like, this wouldn't be good for job growth. Like, this wouldn't create more jobs.
Maybe. I mean, I find this the hardest to argue against. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that New Jersey's corporate sector is poor because it's that much higher. Lots of people set up shop in New Jersey. New Jersey's got a very strong economy. Just happens to be a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, but I don't know the benefits that New Jersey provides for corporations that move there. However, like the amount of businesses in New York City are just so much greater. It's just such a bigger number that it seems pretty risky to me. But we'll see. We'll see. And I just want to pull this back. I didn't want to debate his actual policy. I wanted to talk about the phenomenon of him. I thought it was worth going through his policies just so we can examine.
We definitely hit all of the big points, so we can kind of pull back from that.
There's other Yeah, there are other ones as well, like raising the minimum wage to $30 by 2030, all that stuff. Now, with Zohran, what I find most interesting about him is that obviously it's, he's a really good speaker. He's a skilled politician. Anyone to achieve what he achieved in terms of not being, he's coming out of a, he's going down a very different political path. Like most politicians are groomed in some certain way. They're groomed either in the Ivy League system, they're groomed in activist circles, they're groomed in, could be a nonprofit circle. There's like this, this pathway that they take. And for him, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, where he really came from, like what his grooming background was. Like for instance, in Chicago, like Brandon Johnson, he came from like the teachers union,
right?
In Boston, Michelle Wu, she's like a Harvard technocrat type. Eric Adams comes from the NYPD and like the Brooklyn political machine. He comes from something like very different, and it's hard to really like pinpoint that political path. And it's one of the reasons why he seems so foreign to everyone, because he's also very young. So he hasn't really had that much time to be groomed.
Yeah. He's younger than both of us.
Yeah. So I think it's one of the reasons why his emergence is so interesting. Like with Barack Obama, like he kind of came out of nowhere. Before Obama,
I mean, if you're based outside of Chicago, yeah, he came out of nowhere. If you're in Chicago, you knew who he was.
Even in Chicago, he came out of nowhere because he was like sent to Chicago to advance his political career, because that was like the breeding ground for like Democrats at the time, was going into Chicago politics. And that's how he kind of emerged as a national figure. It doesn't seem like he was sent from anywhere.
Say it like he was sent
from
another planet.
He doesn't.
What was he sent from Mars? It might as well have been, based on like the reactions that some people are having to, where he's coming from. I hear you though. He's different. He's different, and like that's scary for some people. And it's hard to pin him down, and it's hard to make arguments against him because he doesn't leave a whole lot of like openings. A lot of the things that people attack Mamdani on are just baseless. If you want to call him a communist, you clearly don't understand what communism is, right? If you want to call him like an Islamist, you've clearly never heard him speak. Like I haven't. If you want to say he's going to institute Sharia law, like first of all, how, right? On what legal precedent? On how, right? And second of all, just like have you never heard him speak? I haven't heard him say a single damn thing. I don't think he's uttered the word Sharia ever. So I don't know. It's just it ruffles some feathers because people want the status quo. Like this is a going against the status quo. This is more akin to like an AOC or a Cory Bush, because they also come from not the same political backgrounds. I mean, we're talking about AOC was like a middle class Bronx family, like service. She was a bartender. You know what I mean? And it's hard to like navigate these people because, suddenly, they don't play the game the same way because they weren't groomed in that system to play the game that way.
Well, it's interesting to see. I want to see like, so does left wing essentially this is left wing populism. Does this reflect like a broader consensus around the country, or how many people across the country are kind of down with this version of left wing politics? Is it it's not going to be the suburbs, it's not going to be the Trump voter, or maybe it could be if he broadened his appeal. It seems like a pretty hard it seems like a pretty weak bridge to cross to include the kind of like suburban white voters or suburban middle class white voters.
Well, let's play with that. Let's play with the Trump voter because, you know, when there was the election between Biden and Harrison and Trump, that's what it ended up as. A big talking point on the MAGA side was like cost of eggs, right? Suddenly we got this brown guy is like, hey, I'm gonna make it so that the eggs aren't expensive.
Well, let me actually pull this back, and I'll actually give some credit. So a lot of Trump voters voted for Obama, and voting for Obama at that time, I mean, how can you get more foreign sounding than somebody named Barack Hussein Obama, right?
Obama, right.
So I guess that is possible. Another thing is that I saw this interview with Zohran, and he was interviewing people in Queens, and basically he was talking to the people who talked to Trump, who voted for Trump, and he's like, "Why did you vote for Trump?" He wasn't hostile at all.
Right.
He was like, he has this. What's his power? He has this kind of like
he's very disarming.
Yeah, he's like almost like motherly. He has this motherly demeanor, and I'm not saying like he's effeminate, like it's like this comforting.
He's I think the word you're looking for is disarming. He doesn't come at you.
Yeah,
you know, like he's just talking. You know, and he doesn't make you angry, even if he's not saying what you believe or what you want to hear. It's interesting.
He seems nice. You know, he's not dripping in malice.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Like a lot of
Yeah.
You know, there's some politicians that just like are just dripping.
They're just so angry at something. Yeah.
They're dripping with contempt when they talk.
Yeah.
Like someone like Lori Lightfoot in Chicago. Like she just when you hear her speak, the malevolence that's like that she speaks with is like it's so apparent. Like he doesn't have that. But again, he's coming out of like, he's not coming from like the traditional grooming systems. And when I say grooming systems, like, you know, there's the Democratic grooming system and then there's a Republican grooming system. Like the Republican grooming system is business basically. It's like, it's either business, military, or some sort of like religious, like church network.
Right.
And then you have like kind of your exceptions like J.D. Vance, who kind of comes from like the Ivy League
technocrats,
technocrat bubble. Like, you know, he basically sucks Peter Thiel's dicks. And I said dicks, like he has two of them.
He might, man.
But he probably has like 10 of them.
Yeah.
So, and then you have like with Democrats, it's like, all right, you got like your elite academic types, like someone like Pete Buttigieg. Or, you know, you put
in fairness,
Obama
Pete Buttigieg was in
Columbia.
The military, so.
But he went to Harvard, and I think he studied in Oxford too.
What outweighs what? You know, does your military experience and your combat, you know, experience outweigh the?
Well, his military experience was very much. It wasn't like. So he went on one of those special commissions where he like trains for like 2 weeks and then is sent into then he's sent into Iraq. Like he drove a truck, but he didn't. He's not really a military guy.
Dude, driving a truck in Iraq during the surge must have been one of the fucking scariest things.
No. I'm not discrediting that, but he didn't come up from like the traditional military background. Like he took military service as like a political track. And I don't want to get too far into him, but where Democrats typically come from are like the Ivy League system, the union, kind of machine politics. Someone like Eric Adams comes out of that. Then there's like kind of like the activism, you know, politicians that emerge from like activist movements, and he doesn't really fit neatly into anywhere. I guess if you were going to put him somewhere, put him in the activism circuit, but I don't know entirely how true that is because he's not,
you know, because his parents are both academics from Uganda, so you know there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, I would have put him. I'm not saying he's not smart. I'm just saying that doesn't really fit.
It's just
when
not,
I say
that's
like
not the grooming.
Academic,
that's not where he was groomed. Yeah,
I'm talking about coming from like top tier Ivy League institutions. Like he doesn't come from that. But maybe I just have to do some more research on him. But I understand the appeal. Like, listen, like I don't really endorse any of his policies. I don't live in New York anymore, New York City anymore, so I don't have I'm not able to vote. And if he won, I don't think it would be that big of a deal, to be completely honest. I don't think it would be that different from another mayor. However, I can understand why I understand why people find him appealing. I know this lady. Well, I don't know her personally, but my friend was telling me about this lady that she works with. She's a teacher. She doesn't work with her, but one of her students, this lady is from Africa. She's from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
She has 2 children with autism,
Mm-hmm.
2 separate fathers, basically no resources, doesn't even kind of understand like what paperwork that she needs to fill out to get like additional resources for things like support or child support and all that. And the kids have autism, and one of the kids has like severe autism where the kid wanders out at nighttime. Like he leaves the house. He's like 5 years old and he just leaves the house.
Nice.
She has to sleep with a leash. She has to put a leash on him. And like a normal person, that's child abuse. You put a leash on your child when they sleep. It's like, I don't know, like what other options does this lady have?
Right.
If the kid is wandering outside into like into a busy
you can't like
street,
lock yourself
like,
in
what else
because
are you
that
gonna
would
do?
be a fire hazard, you know?
And I'm just thinking like, man, some people just have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have zero resources at all. Like, what do you say to these people? Like, and there's plenty of people like this everywhere in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like what can you do for these people? What hope do they have? And I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's just like really unfortunate when it comes to kind of left-wing politics, because, hey man, I don't believe in like raising the minimum wage to $30 because I think it'd have a lot of consequences that would backfire. However, if I was making $20 an hour, I would certainly believe in a $30 minimum wage.
Yeah.
You know, if I was working a job, if I was a cashier or a low wage worker, I would certainly be pushing and want those policies. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what emerges, because it seems like populism from both sides is kind of what people want right now. And I will say that this like democratic socialist or social democratic socialist, it is very far from communist. Zohran is just much more of just like I would call him a populist, like a left-wing populist, if anything, like
progressive populist,
you know,
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's really not, like Marx would not agree with these policies.
He's
obviously.
not seizing the means of production, you know? he's not setting up a stateless, classless society. Like he's just doing some,
it's just
some
more
social welfare programs, you know, like
more. Yeah. It's just more social welfare programs.
Yeah.
And, so I think people is confused there, but Marxism is essentially dead. Like no one really pushes Marxism anymore.
No. It's just right now used as a pejorative for
French people.
It's just a pejorative at this point in this country for left-wing politics. You know, that's it.
But interesting stuff. All right. How long have we been recording for? I haven't even been checking. Almost 2 hours.
Well, we'll see how it comes out, because we had some stoppage time in the middle. But
okay. So let's end this thing. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Bro History. Really do appreciate you. If you want our this was actually a full episode meant to be a segment. So
we just ended up talking.
If you want the full episode, yeah. If you want to listen to the full episodes, go to our Substack, and they're also ad-free. Anything else that you want to add?
Engage with us. Talk to us. You can tell us what you think about the show on Spotify. Or you can head over to YouTube if you're not already there, and chat with us. We respond. We'd love to hear what you think about what we're doing over here.
All right. Thanks, guys. Peace.